down. And I have nothing but terrible things to say about that. That's just, it's not cool. You can't put someone down in order to bring yourself up. That is so juvenile. Crabs in a bucket. That is ridiculous. We should all be bringing each other up. And that's what I love about John is he'll bend over backwards to help me out, even if it doesn't help him. He is the most selfless dude, one of the most selfless dudes I've ever met. So Professor Herb's the man.
If
Also, like one of the sorry, Ben, go on.
if Dakota thinks that John is a bad seller, he's obviously never met or even watched something like Prehistoric Pets, which we've dissed them here before, but like John is far from a bad seller. He makes sure his animals go to a nice home, and
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone has anything bad to say about John. I think it was just that John made this video about this topic, and then this other YouTuber who is a self-proclaimed expert on grow tents was like, I'll make a response video and it's going to garner me a bunch of attention, a bunch of views, and it did. And then it kind of dragged John and I into this other podcast. And at the same time, like, I didn't advertise that podcast to anybody because I already knew it was going to go off the rails, right? Those two are incapable of speaking intelligently. So I already knew. And I think I knew right from the beginning it was just going to be John and I trying to, like, all right, well, this is where we are. How do we move forward? And those two, like, and the thing is too, like, this dude, he kept saying, he's like, well, let's just like, water under the bridge. It's like, well, no, this guy attacked this guy's business. And then now you just want to like sit there and talk about reptiles? Are you, what's wrong with you? Like, no, that's not going to happen.
But the thing is, that podcast, but you might not have known, is that podcast Dakota also co-hosts. So it wasn't mutual ground or what they were saying.
Oh, I knew that going in.
Probably like a place to just ambush you,
tragic,
basically.
Dude. Yeah, well, that's what it was. And the thing is, though, like, I think the difference is going into it, it's very clear that John and I are both well-spoken enough and can keep our composure, where those two can't. So if anything else, I said to the admin team on my Discord, that's the only people I told about it, and they all kind of said the same thing. It's like, you guys are just kind of like sitting there and trying to talk it out, and then those two were just going crazy. I kind of knew that's the way it was going to be to start with. So I think anyone who watched it kind of came away with the same idea. This guy is a crazy person, and he attacked some guy who didn't deserve it. And that's kind of the idea in the first place going into it.
Yeah, I also think, like, going back a bit to what you said about like trying to bring people up in this hobby, because there's a lot of people who are like doing things that need to be improved. I think like that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, is try to like talk to people, learn more, talk to people who like have an influence on this hobby like yourself, and just try to like get it out there that like there's more to this hobby than just the animals, like the people are like the most important thing of this hobby, because if the people are always going to be fighting and disagreeing on everything, like you only have to think like how far will we go before we start to crash, if that makes sense,
Yeah, and I think the thing is too, now it's a lot of like not what is correct, but I want to be correct. And that's kind of like a problem with not just the reptile community, that's with every community. And what I do besides this a stand-up comedian, that is even a way worse thing, because it's this political correctness. And with here in this hobby, I think it's just like a lot of tearing each other down, and like I know best. It's kind of like a measuring competition of like who knows more. It's like, who cares? That's why I never tout myself as an expert. I always say, like, the motto of the channel is let's learn about reptiles together. I don't know everything, you don't know everything. I know stuff you don't know, you know stuff I don't know. So let's just learn from each other. And then this whole subculture of like, I know more than you, and you shouldn't be making videos because you're not an expert on this. It's like, well, I said in the very beginning, this is my opinion. So like, I can make videos about my opinion, so can you. Like, if you, get off your butt and you start a channel then, if you know better than me,
Right. I think there's a very key word that you just used there, and that was competition. I think there's so much in this hobby now that like everyone is just trying to be better. Everyone's trying to be like, oh, I have the better cage, or oh, I have the cooler animal, or I think that's a pretty important word right there, and something that we all need to improve on, like everybody in the hobby. Because even myself, I've gone up to people and been like, yeah, but I have this animal that's cooler, like I feel like everyone does it, and I think that's one of the big things we could improve on as a whole, not just like individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there should be any competition. There's enough room for all of us. It's a small niche. And like at the end of the day, yeah, we all want to be like in the top tier, like up with the big boys, up with like the Snake Discoveries and the Clints and stuff like that. And, like, I get that, but you don't have to tear someone else down in order to get there. And even if you're not like a YouTube person, like just in the hobby of reptiles altogether, to be like, oh, I want to be like one of the people they talk about, like I'm an expert on this. Well, just because you want to be an expert doesn't mean that you have to put everyone else down. Like, who cares? And at the end of the day, as long as you're, what do you want to get out of it? Why are you doing this in the first place? Are you someone who wants to actually educate and do better for the hobby, or are you someone who wants to feed your ego? And I think that's kind of what we see a lot of, is these people just want to feed their ego. Look how much I know. Look how cool my enclosure is. Look at these animals that I have. And that's why I don't care. Like I get criticized all the time. You have a boring collection. It's the same thing everyone else has. You have nothing super interesting. It's like, well, I have what I want to have and what I want to take care of. I don't care what you want me to have, because you're not coming over to my house and taking care of it. I am. So I think it's just a lot of like a measuring competition, and it's just pointless, and there's no like no winner.
Yeah, like especially when I'm giving advice, I try to keep it to like private messages and stuff, just so it doesn't come across like I'm trying to make my ego bigger. Because I think, and it's also, it's just ego, most of it.
I think it's also like, I mean, this may be an extreme word to use, but I think it's also just like pretty cowardly, to just like try to make yourself seem like you're trying to do something for the hobby when really you're the exact problem in it, and you're putting other people down for something that you interpreted as something against you when it wasn't, because that's kind of what happened with the whole thing. Is he just I don't even know how to talk right now.
I get what you're saying.
He took it in a way that John was going against him when he was just stating his opinion,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, is like to state your opinion and to be attacked for it is like childish and ridiculous. And I think that anybody who makes a call-out video about someone who didn't even say anything bad about you in the first place is ridiculous. And someone's going to say about this, well, hey man, didn't you make a video about Brian Barchuk? And yes, I did. But my video, I don't know if you guys watched it. The whole idea of the video was we shouldn't be hating on people who did stuff bad before, or stuff that was frowned upon before. We should judge them on now. And I think that's the difference between what I did and what he did, because he did a video, hey, like educating or taking him to school or whatever, ridiculous. And the entire video, the way he was speaking down to him in such a it was just the most ridiculous thing I've ever watched. And it was almost like cringeworthy to even watch. Like I was cringing the entire time I was watching. I'm like, why is this guy speaking down to this guy who, even though doesn't have as much experience as you, I would trust with my reptiles before I would trust you. Like it just seems so ridiculous.
Yeah, but like this guy, who I think I know who you're talking about, recently made a video of where they threw out a crested gecko baby. Like,
oh, that's cool. Herping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched that. I saw that come up. So did you watch, like, what happened with that? Like, just the Close Notes version?
I didn't watch it. I couldn't. I mean, like, I don't know, man. I don't even know what to think about it because I didn't watch it. But, like, just that title is so bad. I mean,
I like Go Herping, and the reason I like him is because I like his personality and how much effort he puts into the videos. And I think that as long as your animals are being taken care of, the next level of why people will watch you is for your content, one, but also how you present the content. Because at the end of the day, even if you're an animal educator, but you're doing it on YouTube, you're an entertainer. So with him, I think his videos are as entertaining as anybody else's, which is why I like his videos. And also I kind of like his cocky type of like style. I like it. But I think that he's done a couple videos where it's like, what are you doing? The one where he's getting his reptiles to fall off the table, like that one, I don't know. I'm not going to put him down. I think I like his channel. He's one of my favorites, but I do think that was like a lapse in judgment maybe. And I haven't watched this one about the throwing out a baby crescent gecko. I'll watch it later so I can like comment on it. But if it's just like I accidentally threw one out, why would you make a video about that? It just makes you look careless. Like I don't know. I haven't watched the video. I'm just guessing just by the title.
Well, here's Callum Ray with the explanation.
Because he assumed the egg went bad. Oh, I see.
So I mean, I guess if that's the case.
Yeah, what's the saying that Snake Discovery uses? Incubate until there's no debate, right? That's how I do things. And I've had lots of babies where I think it's not going to hatch, and then they do. But there's a lot of times where I just leave the eggs in the incubator and they start to mold over and they go bad. But at least then you know. So I always leave it. Like I never would make that mistake, or I shouldn't say I would never. I try not to, and I have steps in place to make sure I don't make that mistake.
Yeah, I haven't bred reptiles yet. I mean, I have, but not recently. I bred Kenyan sand boas a while ago.
Well, that's cool. Stuff that gives lives birth is really cool.
Yeah, it was a very short project. I didn't do much with it, but it was fun when it lasted. But I'm working right now more with like invertebrates. Right now I have one gravid female praying mantis that should give birth any day now. But like, you know, I have the same thing. I would pretty much incubate eggs, like one, because I plan to start breeding more reptiles, but pretty much how I'm going to go is just pretty much incubate them till they mold so bad they're like decomposing. Honestly, yeah, I feel like that's just
that's what I do too.
It's like pretty much safe than sorry.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if it smells, who cares? Like you just clean it out and it doesn't smell anymore. Like I've had, especially like hognose eggs. I've had, I think last year it was 3 eggs that didn't hatch. I incubated them for like another 2 weeks after everything was out, and I cut them open, and it was just like not good. It's something you don't make a video on, obviously, because it's disgusting. But at least I knew that I wasn't throwing out eggs that would eventually hatch. And I saw in the chat here that the dude said that he eventually got them out, which is good. And I get why he would make the title of that video, because at the end of the day, the way that we make money is by getting people to click and watch the videos. So you kind of have to make, you know, these clickbaity titles. But the reason that I wouldn't call that clickbait is because, well, he actually gave the audience what he advertised. He did throw a crested gecko, if that's how it went. So yeah, I got no problem with that. And if you got him out, it is what it is. And he's showing that he made a mistake and he rectified the mistake, and the animal is safe and he didn't kill it. So yeah, that's cool.
I think that's a big step. Like if you can admit you made a mistake, that's pretty big.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah. And I think that if you can't admit that you made a mistake, you've got no business being an educator or entertainer in this hobby, because it's kind of bad. Because like I've made mistakes too, and I've said it. I made a whole video about how I was wrong about bearded dragons. Like that was the title of the video. I was wrong about bearded dragons. So I've got no problem.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Wrong about something. Yeah, and like, or even some guy, he still brings it up. This is like, I was doing videos for 6 months maybe, and I said that most tortoises don't have claws that can hurt you. And then he showed me this one species of tortoise that grows these really crazy claws and could probably hurt you. Like this ridiculous exception. And then I eventually said in a video, hey, I was wrong about this, just so you know, just like as a side note. This guy still brings it up every time I post in the Facebook group. Hey, remember that time? It's like, bro, that was 18 months ago. You know, like wipe the Cheeto dust off your fingers on the keyboard there. Have your 5th monster of the day. Tell them I'm gonna be late for dinner upstairs. Okay, like what are you doing? Hibernating in your basement, making fun of YouTubers who like just explain that they were wrong.
That was
pretty hot on that one, but
that was funny. Nah, going back to like Brian Barczyk, we've talked about him a couple times now, and we've always come to the same conclusion. Like every YouTube video that's dashing him is dashing him about mistakes he made like 7 years ago, when all those things were actually acceptable, right? Mm-hmm. You know, now he's like greatly improved. I mean, look at the Reptarium, first of all. Second of all, look at like how he's doing with his ball pythons. He's moved all of them over to proper substrate. He's adding enrichment to every snake enclosure. All his blue tongue skinks are getting big vivariums with UVB and heat and like, all sorts of crazy setups. Like he's really improving because he's learned how to take that criticism, And I'm happy for him, man, because, he got so much hate.
Like, so, well, if you're the biggest guy, if you're the top of the mountain, you're going to get the hate. That's how it works. And even like at a small level, but I agree with you. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Why are you bashing someone for something they did in 2008 when now they're not doing that? I think that's the perfect explanation. If you're doing something right now, he obviously took your criticism and now he's moving forward with it. So why, instead of, hey, remember you did that in 2008? Why don't you look at what he's doing now and be like, hey, man, that's great. Good job. Positive reinforcement.
Yeah. Just like how you train a monitor lizard, positive reinforcement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I think that, but that's the thing too, is like, I think that it's a good point. Back in the day, like you said, when it was not frowned upon, back in the day, it was when it was kind of like accepted. And it's the same thing with anything else. Like people now are trying to cancel dead guys, right? Can you believe John Wayne said this in He was a white guy in 1960. I totally believe that he said that. So why are you trying to? It's the same sort of thing now to a lesser degree, where you're trying to punish someone for something that happened and they can't take back. So have they gone and rectified the situation? Have they learned from it? Well, yeah. So then why are we still talking about it? Let's move on to something else. It just like it's outrage for the point of being outraged. It's recreational outrage is what it is.
Yeah, that's pretty much right on what you said. Honestly, I mean, I think like I don't even know like how to really word what I'm thinking right now, but I think like the biggest thing in this hobby right now that we could like improve on, kind of like a side turn, right? But the biggest thing in this hobby that I think we can improve on would honestly just be like support, you know? Like who can we support in this hobby? Because also you have to think about this, like people who get a lot of hate, if they get so much hate, at some point they'll just stop taking criticism, you know? Why would they take criticism when they get so much hate? Like everyone would have to admit, like that would be hard to differentiate.
They've just become jaded at a certain point where it's like, well, no matter what I do, I just get hate. So what's the point? Because obviously what they're saying, there's no way that I can rectify to a point where they say, hey, you took the criticism, great job. And I think that the only way to get through to someone who you actually think for real is doing something bad, not because you want to show how much better you are than them, but if you actually see someone doing something that is wrong, the only way to get through them and to make them take you seriously is to pull them aside, private message, not in front of a group of people, not in a Facebook comment, not in a YouTube comment, and say, hey, man, I saw that you did this. Have you ever thought about doing this? This is why I say that. And have a back and forth calm discussion. If you're just going to go at someone's throat, make a call-out video, or any other childish maneuver to do that, or even a public thing, it's absolutely ridiculous, it's childish, and it's pathetic, and it's getting no one anywhere except for maybe you a bunch of views, but really it's just pity views because you're doing something pathetic in order to get attention. And I think that that's what we see a lot of. And actually someone, I've explained this before, someone, a Canadian guy who's kind of like around me, I was getting a lot of hate on this post, and it was just about keeping not enough enrichment in a lot of my tubs when I used a lot of racks. And he pulled me aside and he was like very nice to me. Hey man, I think you should do this because of this. And I listened to him, and I got most of my animals out of racks because of this one guy and how professional he was. And he wasn't like bashing me like everybody else. And I took him seriously because he actually cared. It made him very clear that he actually cared. And it wasn't like a, hey, you do this and I do this and I'm better than you. So I think that we can all like take a lesson of that and kind of treat other people with respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think like it's not only going to be beneficial to the person if you give them like properly constructive criticism, but it's going to be beneficial to the animals, you know? And if you come in all hard and like, do this, do that, I'm right, you're wrong, like they obviously won't listen. Who would listen? I wouldn't listen to that, you know? I'd probably just block you and ignore you, you know? But like if someone came to me calm, like I would actually look into it some more, you know, get some proper sources into it, right? And then change it, you know? And that would not only benefit myself because I'm learning, but it benefits my animals because I'm improving their care, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only way to do it. Sorry, Ben, what were you saying?
I see the John Poacher thing. John said, I can see the point of grow tents, but they're not for me. If you can buy a vivarium, why not go for one? He didn't say that they're bad because he obviously said that he hadn't had the experience with them as well.
Right. Yeah, it was an opinion piece, and he explained it like it was an opinion, and that's I think the gripe of the other dude was, hey, you're giving out bad information, but if I prefix something with my opinion is, then no. If I said my opinion is the sky is orange, well, then that's my opinion. You know that I'm wrong, but he didn't speak in absolutes. If I said, in my opinion, looking at a sunset isn't beautiful, well, it doesn't mean that it's not. It's just my opinion. Just like how John said, in my opinion, I think that there are better options. There's no right or wrong answer to that. Maybe they are and maybe they aren't, and it depends on you because it's an opinion-based thing. My opinion is I like the color purple. It doesn't mean that it's a good or bad. You understand what I'm saying? There's no absolute.
Yeah.
Where if he said, my opinion is grow tents can never work ever for any species, then that's an absolute. But he didn't say that. And I think that's the thing. The critical thinking that was lacked in that call out video was that. And I don't even know if it was actual critical thinking, like a lack of critical thinking, or if it was let's throw critical thinking to the wind because critical thinking doesn't make lots of YouTube views. So who cares? And I'll just kind of like interpret it the way that I want to interpret it in my fantasy land. And I think that's kind of what happened, to be honest.
Yeah, the problem starts when people say you can't do something just because they haven't had the best experience with it. Like, obviously, Go Herping saying you can't keep leopard geckos on substrate.
Mm-hmm.
And then he puts them on reptile carpet. I've had negative things with reptile carpet just because it's it can trap their nails and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I think that's what we need to do too as like educators and entertainers is not speak in absolutes. Like I would agree, I don't like reptile carpet. So but the way I phrase it is I don't use reptile carpet because of this. I don't say you shouldn't use reptile carpet because of this, or you can't, or you're abusing your animal. I personally don't use reptile carpet because I had a leopard gecko pull one of its nails out and bled all over the place on reptile carpet. And maybe you use reptile carpet for 30 years and it never happens to you, but it can happen and it happened to me. So I changed because of that. So now I'll use either paper towel or newspaper, or I'll use a proper substrate, a loose natural substrate. So I think that's the big difference. And I think that as people who have an audience, that's the way we should phrase things that aren't absolutes. Right? If I say as an absolute, a leopard gecko will never get to 10 feet long, I think we're all cool with that, right? A leopard gecko is not going to be 10 feet long. But if I say that, hey, a leopard gecko cannot be kept in anything that is less than 120 gallons, well, that's wrong. It's not wrong to keep them in 120 gallons, but to say you can't keep them in a 75 or a 40 or whatever is. So I think that we just need to be very careful with our language. I think that's the takeaway.
I mean, if we're kind of on the topic of like housing reptiles, like what are your opinions on grow tents? You know, I mean, yeah. Like, what do you think of them?
I don't think there's anything wrong with grow tents at all. I think that for certain species, you need a substantial amount of reinforcement. For example, if you wanted to keep a black and white tegu, an adult black and white tegu, in one of those grow tents you buy on Amazon for $100. I don't think that's a great idea if you don't reinforce it. If you reinforce it, and actually I think that this dude, Dakota, he actually does a really good job with the grow tents. So my problem is not with the way he keeps animals at all. And in fact, like the way he does it with like the bamboo around it, that's a great idea. I think you need to do that, but I think it needs to be explained that you need to do that. Because if you just say to someone, oh yeah, you can keep monitors and tegus and grow tents, well, what that means to me as someone who doesn't watch all your videos and it was never explained to me is I just need to go get a grow tent and toss an animal in it. Well, if you do that, an animal that is as strong and powerful as a black and white tegu, they're going to rip out of that enclosure immediately. And then they're going to be, I don't know, go eat your neighbor's cat. Not actually, it's just a joke. But you understand what I mean? Like it's a bad thing to do. So I guess the short answer is I don't think there's anything wrong with grow tents. I think they take a little bit more effort. And I think that it requires a little bit more to do.
Upkeep.
Yeah, upkeep, and also just like an overall setup, it just requires a little bit more knowledge on how to do it than if you just bought a PVC, right? If you buy a PVC, you know, cages PVC, it shows up to your house, you put it together, you're good. You don't have to add any extra reinforcement. You just outfit it properly, right? That's it.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, I used to keep animals in grow tents. I had my tegu in a grow tent. I had my Savannah monitor in a grow tent. Before I was really knowledgeable, I had my boa constrictor in a grow tent, right? And well, I moved all of them out. They're now all in wooden vivariums, right? But one problem I had with it is they were so big, and like the doors were so big. When you open the doors, like all the humidity would escape. So I could never keep proper humidity inside the really big ones. Second thing is, I mean, I have a Savannah monitor, and when he was in a grow tent, he was maybe about 1.5 feet long, and he ripped straight through it. I mean, it was like a thick one. It was like it was like a 3.5 foot long by 1 by 1, right? Pretty small one. I upgraded him shortly after. But he just ripped right through it. And I spent a lot of money. It was like a good quality one. He ripped straight through it. You know, I think it's a risk. And in my eyes, that risk isn't worth it. You know, I think if there's any risks when you're keeping animals and they're unnecessary, I think it's kind of meh, you know? And also, I also just recently learned from talking to Ben and other people who knew more about grow tents than I did, like they can get their legs and their necks trapped in the zipper and like have them like lose legs and die. We know someone, me and Ben, who had a rescue come in, who had its leg missing because it lost it to a zipper in a grow tent.
And I think that's the important thing too, is if you're going to advocate for grow tents, I don't think there's anything wrong with advocating, but it's important to be able to give stories like that, because the anecdotal evidence on the pro grow tent people they're completely safe. There's no way your animal's going to rip out of them and they're not dangerous. But we know that's not true because of what you just told me. So I think that if you want to use grow tents, that's fine. But also, if you're someone who has an audience and who is saying you should use grow tents, you should also say, here's what could happen and here's how to prevent it. Because if you, as a entertainer, whatever, a YouTube person says, hey, use grow tents, and then someone goes out and then their animal who they love and like is part of their family dies because of your advice, because you didn't explain it properly, I don't think it's totally on you, because that person should have done their own. But what is it to you to use an extra 15 seconds of your time to say, by the way, this is what can happen, here's how to prevent it? I think that it's kind of your responsibility to a certain extent. I don't think that it's your liability. I don't think if someone were to do that and have that happen to them, it's not that person's fault. But also, I think that as someone who has an audience, you should be doing everything you can in your power and in your knowledge to put it out there. And that's why when I do videos, if I say, hey, if there was a problem with, perfect example, PVCs, I say if you use a bulb with a snake, make sure that you cover the bulb. Because I've had it before where someone has used a PVC and they have a snake and it wraps around a bulb at night, bulb turns on in the morning and it burns that snake to the point where it's a problem. So I think that I always say that, make sure that you cover the bulb. And I think it's just a perfect example of that. If you want to say, go for it with the grow tents, just advise the cons as well as the pros.
Yeah, I think the reason a lot of people don't give the cons is because if they use it themselves, they're bound to get hate for it and be like, well, if this and this and this could go wrong, then why are you risking it? Or you're a bad keeper for doing this and this and that, That's bound to happen. And I feel like some of those people would rather just like face someone else's problem, like, their animal dying due to their advice, and just like deal with that 5-second message from them saying, oh, your advice killed my animal, then like give themselves a worse reputation due to their acknowledgement of the problem that can happen.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that the way to mitigate that is to say, hey, this is what could happen, but here's how you can prevent it. And if there is this is what could happen and there's no way to prevent it, well, then you can't use that. If there's and I don't know this of grow tents, I'm not saying that this is a thing, but if grow tents, for whatever reason, there was a problem that could kill your animal, there's no way to prevent it reasonably, then you shouldn't be keeping animals in that. I don't think that's the case. I'm just using that as the example that we're talking about. But yeah, it's a good point, like you said, and it's hard to talk about things that have happened bad in your collection because people will attack you. I think that's goes right back to where we started this conversation with constructive advice rather than just kind of like taking a big dump on people for the point of taking a dump on them. I think that's like, there's no point. Yeah. I don't think that we're ever going to get to a point where that doesn't happen. As you can see with everything else in the world, it's just kind of like a screaming match always, no matter what the topic is or hobby or whatever. So it'll always be that way. But I think that if we can even get small amounts of people like to watch this and kind of think, do I do this? How can I change that? Well, then we're gonna have a better hobby afterwards.
Of course, yeah. I think like a lot of people try to think super broad, like how can I do this for all tegu keepers? Or if you do this wrong, then everyone who does this wrong is bad, right? I think like how we are going to improve this hobby is like fix small problems with small groups of people. Let's say you tell me, okay, don't use Repti carpet for this reason, right? It can rip their nails out. One person sees this who uses Repti carpet, they change it, post it on a Facebook group, then 10 people see that, If you make like very specific points to get it out to a smaller community, it's bound to spread. It may take longer, but I think in the long run, that's how we're going to fix all these small little problems within the hobby,
Mm-hmm. I think kind of like going to where I thought you were going to go with that is like the sound bites that people will take, right? And I think that we saw that with when we started talking about that call out video at the beginning. It was just like these sound bites of stuff John said with no context and then plopped in there. And I think that's the same thing that could happen to any of us. Someone could watch this and then take a soundbite of something that I said about grow tents that was negative after I just said something that was positive and said, this is for an analogy or whatever it was that I said, and say, well, this is what he thinks, because they take the soundbite. So I get why people wouldn't, even, but I think if you're putting yourself out there, I think we should put ourselves out there and not like tippy-toe around it. And I am cautious in the way that, like, I try to be a role model for kids and that I don't swear and, I'm pretty mild-mannered. But at the same time, if I'm going to tackle a topic, I will tackle it full force, and I will tell you everything that I know about it rather than just all the good stuff, because if I say something bad, someone might attack me for it. Well, go ahead, because I'll be able to come back and explain to you why I mentioned that and why I still do that, and then the way that there is to prevent whatever the con was about it. And there's going to be pros and cons for everything in this hobby, everything that there's a pro and con for. So there's no perfect anything with reptiles or most things in life. So I think just to attack these minor little things, where you keep something on reptile carpet and this could happen to you. Yeah, well, it probably won't. So I don't think we should attack people for it. I just don't agree with it, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Yeah, personally, I don't agree with communal tarantulas. So there's one species in particular that everyone seems to think can be kept together, which is the Monocentropus balfouri, the Socotra blue baboon. They say it's beneficial for the tarantula because it's out and about more. But if you look at how they live in the wild, most of their predators are avian. So birds and stuff will find them. Is it a good thing that they're out and about?
Right.
Not necessarily. And people think just because they've been found living communally in the wild, that means they can keep communals of 10, 20, even up to 100 of them.
Right.
And
I don't know anything about tarantulas, but I imagine keeping 100 of something in an enclosure probably, unless that's the way they live in the wild, that's probably not a good way to keep anything. But again, I'll prefix that with, I know zero about tarantulas.
Yeah, and of course, with leopard geckos and stuff, rule one is with a communal, which works with any communal, is that keep an eye on them. And I just don't see how that's possible if you have big communals of anything.
I agree.
Right.
I totally agree. Yeah, if you've got 20 of something in there, how are you going to be able to keep an eye on any of them and keep an eye? Like, if you have 20 of something, there's no way you're going to be able to keep an eye. And like your example of 100, that seems absolutely insane. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Especially because like the species of tarantulas that people tend to cohab. Oh, say that again, Ben.
What people don't tend to realize is that there's as much relying on other people for research wise, like watching a YouTube care video, but you've also got to do your own. You've got to look at how these animals live in the wild. You've got to see their natural behavior.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to what I said earlier too, about if I say something and then you go out and take all my advice and don't do any other research, well, it's not my fault. You made a mistake. There's lots of stuff that I don't know. And that's the same thing. If you watch a care video, if you watch my leopard gecko care video, I think I did a great job. I would like to think that. But at the same time, it doesn't cover everything. And I said you still have to go and do your own research. This is just a fun way to get as much information as possible. But you still have to read stuff, and you have to read, go on forums and read people who are actually experts. I'm not an expert, but read someone who actually has been working with leopard geckos. Tremper, read Tremper's book, whatever. But I agree with you 100%. You have to do research beyond watching one bald idiot talk to his camera in his basement. Like, that is not enough research to go get an animal.
Right. I think also going back to the tarantulas, like the main reason why you cannot keep an eye on that large of number of tarantulas, because those species of tarantulas, they, like Ben said, their predators are avian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they all burrow. So you're just going to have holes everywhere, and you're never going to see your spiders. You may see a couple every now and then, but the majority are going to be hiding. So that's going to make it even harder to keep an eye on them. If you can't keep an eye on your animals, then you're not, who knows? Maybe they're all dead, Like they could all just be rotting in those holes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you have 100 of anything, there's no way you're going to keep an eye on them, especially something that burrows. It's like, even like sand boas. Imagine you had 5 sand boas even in an aquarium. and you have a loose substrate and they're all burrowing, well, how are you going to know if one of them, unless you smell it, you're never going to know. So I think that if you have one, you're going to be able to keep a better eye on it. So yeah, I think that's a very weird thing too. Cohabitation is like such a, I try to do videos on it, but it's a very like hot button issue for sure.
I just, in general, I mean, go on, Ben.
I'm so critical of communal or anything like that. And also, if you're going to keep something communal, don't keep it communal for any length of time, because yeah, sure, they've been observed doing it in the wild, but it's not going to be a permanent thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, like, for me, in my eyes at least, like my opinion, I don't think any communals are good. I mean, you can say whatever you want about like Asian vine snakes being able to live together, you know, or you can say that Argentinian tegus can live together, right? Because there's a lot of people who cohab female tegus, right? Or I don't even know what are reptiles that people cohab. Tortoises, right? I mean, that always works out well, but you know what I mean? In general, I'm very against communals because there's always that unnecessary risk. No matter how small, no matter how rare, it could be like 1 in 1,000, and I still wouldn't agree with it, because you could be that 1 in 1,000, and then you've just put an animal's life in peril because of a choice that you made because you wanted it, you know?
See, it can be done. It's just doing it properly. And that's the problem, is that people don't know how to do it properly. Like, of course, Adam's got his leopard gecko communal, and that's been going well. But, yeah.
And I think that's the thing, too, is like at the end of the day, you're talking about how what's best for the animal. At the end of the day, the reason we keep animals in captivity is for us. That's why we do it.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
And I think that to be giving the best, like your best, the best life to these animals, if that excludes cohabitation, it excludes a lot of other things you do as well. Because if you gave a leopard gecko, everyone would agree that a 40-gallon aquarium is fine for leopard gecko, right?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't it be better to have a 75? Wouldn't it be better to have 120? Yeah. Wouldn't it be better to have a 600-gallon? Wouldn't it be better to have a whole room? So at what point do we say, okay, like this is good enough? And that's why I respect your opinion, and just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that my opinion is I keep leopard geckos together, I keep tortoises together. I don't think anyone would argue that keeping garter snakes together or like green tree frogs, there are certain things that can do really well, but you're right. There is a risk, and whether it's unnecessary or not is kind of like up for debate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have marginated tortoises. I have 2 of them together. That was a bad example on my part. That's why I kind of quickly corrected it. And that's why I'm also not like bashing you or like saying you're a bad keeper or anything like that for keeping your leopard gecko communal, because I know it can work. And I know you are one of the most responsible keepers that I know of. Right. So I have full faith that you can control that communal. I know that you keep an eye on it. I know that you're careful, you know, but the problem is, I think in my eyes, when everybody starts to use communals and things, right, then there's going to be more people who don't be careful because it gets out there that, oh, this can work. So then these novice keepers say, oh, then it'll work for me too, you know?
Like, yeah, I think that people, I feel is like people get annoyed with me because I put so many disclaimers when I talk about my leopard. And by the way, I only keep 1 pair of leopard geckos together, and it's not a pair like a male female. It's 2 females that hatch out of the same clutch on the same day, and they've always been kept together forever. But I always put disclaimers, a lot of them, to the point where people will make fun of me. Right? There's a meme on the internet of my face saying this is not a care guide. Like I put so many disclaimers because I don't want someone to go and be like, hey, well, the Mr. Clean guy does it, so that means I can do it, right? Well, the way that I do it is because, like my tortoises, for example, and you actually said something that was interesting. You said that for tortoises, it always works out, which isn't true of sulcata. Sometimes sulcatas.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly, and that's the thing is I know what you meant. I know what you meant, but someone's going to take the sound bite and be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And that's, I think, goes back to the first part. But the reason I keep my tortoises together is because they've been together forever. I'm the 3rd owner. They've always been together. They've never had an issue. And the same thing with leopard geckos. They've never had an issue. My turtles, I have a Mississippi map turtle and a yellow belly slider, which normally I would never advise to keep together. but they've been together for over 25 years. 25 years, these two turtles have been together. So it's like, well, why am I going to, separate them now? It's never been an issue. But I think that's why it's important to make disclaimers. I think that it's not always good and it's not always bad. There is a gray area, and you just got to use common sense and critical thinking to figure it out.
Yeah. I have my tortoises together. I mean, just because, like, I don't want two massive tortoise enclosures, And, like, second thing, like, I'm going to breed them, So, like, I also think, like, I think I was harsh with my wording when I said about communals, and I made it too broad. I think there's a lot of communals that people do that don't work. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't careful enough. But there are plenty that do work. And I even think garter snakes actually can thrive and, like, do better in communals, They seem to be less temperamental. They seem to be less stressed. They seem to eat better. They seem to be more active. They seem to do better in communals, right?
But the activity part might be because there's competition, if that makes sense. They're eating more because they feel like there's something else there. It goes in so many ways, though.
And I think that's
honestly, we can talk about this all day.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, and I think that this is what separates this podcast as a good podcast to listen to from others, is that we all have differing opinions. We can still kind of hash it out, but I think that Ben made a good point, because it is competition, and that is a very interesting thing. I never really thought of it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. But in the wild, it'd be the same thing, because garter snakes all live in close proximity to each other, especially during certain parts of the year. So when they come out and they start eating, well, they're going to have competition. So it is very natural. But I think that, back to your point, though, where you're saying that we have to give them the best life we can possibly give, and I agree with that, is, well, maybe to a certain degree that competition is needed to stimulate a healthy appetite. And I think that might be something where, right, because you might take Ben's soundbite and say, well, this guy knows what he's talking about, and you shouldn't keep them together because it's competition. But what if the competition is necessary for them to have the appetite that they need to have in order to grow properly? So it's like, you know what I mean? And I don't know this is a fact. I'm just throwing ideas around that might be the case.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Like, with my tortoises, I have it's about they're both about this big right now. And I have about a 5 foot long by 3.5 foot tortoise table. And I provide 2 water dishes and 2 feeding plates and 2 houses, right? Because I call marginated tortoises like mini sulcatas, because they like to bicker, I say. They like to push each other around and fight for territory, right? So to prevent that, I've given a very large space for very young tortoises and lots of options, right? I think that's another thing if you're keeping communals, options. If there's 1 mouse for 3 garter snakes, right? And you feed them 1 mouse at a time, they're gonna fight,
I think that's something that we didn't really bring up too, is like, to you and me and Ben, that is a common sense thing, that you wouldn't put 1 mouse in there for 3, but that might not be common sense to a newer keeper. And I think that's something we take for granted because we have experience. And I get a lot of comments about this. Well, hey, you didn't say this, because to me, it was common sense. So I think that is a great point. And to me, it's like, well, obviously, why would you even waste your breath? But to someone who's new, that's a really great point. And that's something that needs to be brought up when you're talking about communals. And with my leopard geckos, I keep 2 food dishes, even though every time, without doubt, they all go to 1. 2 of them, both of them go to 1, eat it, and then they both go to the next one together. So, like, I could get away with 1, but I still offer 2. I offer multiple hides. So, yeah, there's a right way to do it. And like you said, like, I think that the way you described it is the right way to do it.
And I think, like, what you just said, like, is the exact reason why most of the time I disagree with communals. Because there's always going to be that person who doesn't make the disclaimer that you just said. I just forgot it, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't mention it, right? There's going to be people who don't mention it at all, right? And if they don't mention it at all, there could be someone watching who does exactly what you just said, and, like, doesn't take it to heart. Because for me, it's such a common sense thing, like you said, like, I wouldn't even think twice about it. But, like, I'm actually really happy you said that, because you kind of just, like, proved the whole point of what I was saying,
Yeah. And the thing is, too, a lot of people will say, hey, you didn't say this, But at the end of the day, so last year I made 48 hours of video. And of that 48 hours that gets released, I probably recorded 100. And of that, when you're editing and you're writing, it takes 60 hours a week to do this channel. So if I forget one thing, it's not because I don't know. It's because, or like, for example, in the illegal reptiles, one of the most highly watched videos I ever did, I said there are no elapids in the US. And then I immediately corrected myself in the description saying, hey, coral snakes are elapids. I forgot when I said that. I edited the video already. It was too late to take it out. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. This is the correct thing. Right. I get comments, and this video was released a year ago yesterday. I get comments to this day, at least 3 or 4 every day. Hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Coral snakes are elapids. Bro, read down 2 lines. I said that. I know that I said something wrong. So we're going to mess up. We're going to, misspeak. Steve Irwin did it. So who am I to say that I'm not going to do it, or you or Ben? I think that at the end of the day, we're all going to make mistakes as long as you can correct yourself in a very visible area, like 2 inches below the video, then I think that it's okay. And I think that what you said, you forgot something, but that's going to happen. I think that's a great example of no matter how experienced you are, if you talk for a living or you talk, hundreds of hours a year, you're going to make an issue. You're going to make an error.
Everyone's going to make an issue. One of the very controversial things at the moment in the tarantula keeping community is handling, because handling the tarantula doesn't benefit the animal. They don't have neurological systems as such. They just have a cluster of nerves. You don't know what benefits them. They don't know what benefits them. But people who say this as well go home and handle their corn snake or ball python. And of course, snakes don't benefit really from it either. So,
they tolerate it.
Yeah, they tolerate it.
I would say there's only a small handful of animals that truly, like reptiles, that truly benefit from handling. And that would be varanids and large lizards like tegus, iguanas, etc. Because I'm totally going to anthropomorphize here. From the seams of it, like my tegu loves me, right? Mm-hmm. I open the cage, she walks right out, right into my hands. I put her on my shoulder, I walk around the house, I lay in bed, she sits in my lap, she falls asleep with me, I think that's her benefiting from it. She sometimes spends 6 hours a day just walking my house, exploring under the bed, smelling the dog bed, just doing her thing.
And if it's not mental stimulation, it might be just physical stimulation. Like if you have a Burmese python that's 13 feet long and you have it in a cage that's 8 feet long, and then you take it out so it can crawl all around you and you're that's physical benefit to that animal because it's getting exercise. So it's not even just the mental thing. It could just be the physical thing as well. So the idea to say it doesn't benefit, what does that even mean? And like Ben said, it's just a cluster of, there's no way that you would know. But at the end of the day, are you really going to argue that keeping tarantulas in captivity benefits the animal anyway? No. Yeah. So, it's the idea of having animals in captivity is for us. So when people say, well, you don't have the best interest of the animal at heart. Well, I guess if you really want to go in absolutes there, then, we should just release them all into their native habitats. Don't actually do this. But they'd be much happier out there in the first place, right? That's the most naturalistic environment. So where do you draw the line? And I think that it's a pretty clear-cut thing. Don't keep your Burmese python in a 4x2x2. But you don't have to release it back in the wild to give it the best life. I think that, people just like to muddy the waters and argue for the sake of argument.
That's kind of what I meant with why I'm not 100% with communals, is just because we keep these animals 100% for our own benefit, right? Mm-hmm. So when we take unnecessary risks, no matter how small, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of my thing. But then at the same time, I may say, I'm pretty much fully against communals, but there's always going to be exceptions to what I say. And I'm kind of the person who makes broad things and then goes back later and says, well, I kind of meant this instead of that, But for example, I think you do communals really well. I think you're one of the people who I would fully trust to have a communal, right? I think I do my tortoise communal pretty well, and I think there's species who benefit. I feel like I'm kind of going in circles here, but
Well, I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and then there's a bunch in the middle, but there's definitely right ways to do it. And I don't think it's rocket science to do it, but at the same time, I think that if you're new, it can be challenging to figure that out because you don't know what's common sense and what isn't if you don't have that experience and knowledge. So yeah, I mean, if you're against it, I don't think that's a bad thing to perpetuate within the hobby. But also, I think that it's important that if you're a viewer who listens to what you just said about how communals are always bad, that person can't then go to me and say, "Hey, man, you did something bad because this guy said so." It's like, there's right ways and wrong ways to do it. It's just this guy thinks that it's not worth the risk, and I don't think that's a wrong thing to say. I just think that it would be a wrong thing to say to be like, "Well, he said it," and yeah, it's just like turning against.
That's why I'm not saying to people like, I mean, that's also why I wanted you on this podcast so much. Because like I know we were gonna have different opinions, but I know you're man enough to just like have a good good conversation about it, Learn about each other's opinions.
Yeah. Who's it gonna benefit if you say something I disagree with and then me attack you? Like it's not gonna benefit me. Not only that, but it's just childish. And also, I've been wrong about a lot of things. So just because you're younger than me and have less experience doesn't mean that you can't offer me wisdom and I can't learn something from you. And I think that's what we get with these guys I've been doing it for longer than you've been alive in their sport. It's like, okay, cool. Well, guess what? Every single F1 driver has been driving for less time than you, and they're all better than you. So what's that mean? Just because you're older, you know more? Like, no, this guy, just because they've been doing like Chandler as another one. Chandler gets so much hate, and whether you like him or hate him, because he's a young guy, like he knows what he's doing. I respect that guy. And just because he's not doing it the same way Tom Crutchfield's doing it, who's older and has more experience, doesn't mean that he's wrong. So, and even Tom has said like he's learned things from Tyler Nolan, who's younger than him and has less experience. So just because it's a younger or less experienced person doesn't mean that they're wrong because they do something different than you. And I think that's really important thing but you're never gonna change people's minds. I
think it's also great though. Like I love talking about people and their different opinions because I usually end up forming new opinions from that. And when I form new opinions, I think I grow personally, my knowledge expands. And of course I benefit my animals. Whether not saying I'm going to go put my Tego and monitor together, but like I'm going to have a different outlook on animals after this, if that makes sense,
Yeah, well, it's the way that it's a constantly evolving thing. And if we've been studying animals for hundreds of years and we still find things we didn't know, right? Like we didn't know until 3 months ago that platypuses, they react to UV. I'm so dumb. I can't even I regurgitate things. Platypuses, they are iridescent under UV light. I think that's what we just discovered 2 months ago. See, again, super stupid. But we're learning things that new about animals that we've been studying for hundreds of years. So what's to say we're not going to learn something new about an animal that you've been keeping for 50 years and you should change your mind, right? And that's kind of what I did with the tubs. Someone said to me, "Hey, man, I think that you're doing it wrong. I think this is why you're doing it wrong, and your animals would benefit from doing it this way." And I changed immediately because I researched it and the guy was right. And because he didn't attack me, I took him seriously. And I think that's what we all need to do. And there's a takeaway from the whole thing, because I know that I started pretty hot at the beginning, but we should all just be respectful and have an open mind. And just because someone says something to you and you don't take their advice doesn't mean you're closed-minded. That person just might be wrong. But if someone says something and you think there's some validity to it, you should at least explore it and research it and make your own opinion. Either change or don't change, but don't just shut them out because they're doing something differently than you.
Yeah, but another thing with the invertebrate hobby is everyone keeps isopods in their communals, in their tarantula enclosures. And I know for a fact that isopods are will scavenge anyway. They will eat a molting tarantula. Just to prove my point, I put a dead African giant millipede in there, and that's literally all that's left of it.
I saw you posted that on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, kind of totally mega swerving this conversation. Would you ever consider keeping invertebrates like tarantulas, praying mantises, scorpions, something like that?
It's not something that I wouldn't it's something that I don't really have an interest in now, but it's not something I would say never. Personally, I'm not a big fan of tarantulas. Like, if you were to hand me one, I would say no thanks. Like, I would treat it like if you were like trying to hand me a baby. It's like, I'm not interested. No, thank you. But like, it's certain things like scorpions I find super interesting. Isopods I have, but I use them as like a cleanup crew for my crested gecko, stuff like that. So I wouldn't say no, never, but I don't have any plans right now, just because my focus is mostly on reptiles and amphibians.
Yeah, I was a really long time. I spent pretty much my whole life since I was 3 years old, just working with reptiles. You know, I got a bearded dragon when I was a little kid. You know, and I spent my whole life working with reptiles. I've worked with so many species of reptiles. It's gnarly crazy. But like just recently, just in the past, like, I don't know, 2 years. I mean, I've always kept invertebrates, but in very small numbers, you know. But just recently, I really swerved into it, and like now I have 2 snakes and 3 lizards and 2 tortoises. That's all the reptiles I have. The rest of my like 76 animals are all like invertebrates and things. So
yeah, like I think that's the thing too, is like, who cares on the number? People rag on Professor Hurt for this all the time. Like, he has got so few, but he takes really good care of them. And as long as you're taking good care of your animals and you have what you actually are interested in, and like I said at the beginning of the thing, like, people, you know, they say in the comments all the time, hey, why don't you get this? Why don't you get this? I would subscribe to your channel if you had one of these. And it's like, well, I don't care, because if I'm not interested in it, I'm not going to take the best care of it. And I think that's, you know, the big thing. And you have what you like, and you started expanding. Right. And at a certain time, I would have never imagined getting myself a Burmese python. Now I have one, and I'm very happy I do. I can't wait for her to grow. And there's certain animals that have been given to me, like my my boa. It was just a buddy of mine. I've known him forever. He was moving in with his fiance and her parents into their parents' home. And they said, you can't have the snake. He gave it to me. And I didn't really want a red tail. But now I'm so happy that I have her. I love Franny. It's awesome. So
is it a true red tail? Sorry to interrupt, but no, is it a true red tail?
No, it's not. It's a BCI or BI, I guess now. Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm
so confused why they changed that. Like BI, BCI.
They changed, man. They just change it. Like Western hognose isn't a Western hognose anymore. It's a plains hognose. And people will like, that's the thing too, is like, if I say Western hognose, 8 months ago, you never would have said anything because you didn't know. Now that you know it's a plains hognose because Dave Coffin did a video, and that's the only reason that you know. Then you start I get this all the time. Like, even on the videos that I did before the name change, they'll come, well, you're giving wrong information. It's like, I made that video 2 years ago. Like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Right? And by the way,
is it really wrong? Like,
I mean, is it wrong? And is it damaging in any way, shape, or form? And the answer is no. I am not a professor at a university. I am some idiot in a basement with purple walls. Like, give me a break. I'm going to tell you what I think is right, or what I think is like. And the thing is, too, and I grew up with it being Western hognose, and old habits die hard. So that's why I continue to call them Western hognose, even though it's technically not right. But I promise you, not one hognose in the history of hognosedom has ever died because you called it the wrong name. Right? I think that's the takeaway.
If you search up Western hognose snake, you're going to come up with a Western hognose snake. It's not going to be like, oh, sorry, your result is not found. And then you search up plains hognose, is like, yada, 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 you know? Like,
and there's no misinformation. If you look for the Western hognose guide and you have a plains hognose, it's not like you're getting wrong information. You're getting all the right information. Exactly. They just didn't use the right language. So, like, it's anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, another kind of off-topic question. I mean, like, how long have you been keeping Adam? I mean,
so I got my first reptile. I can't remember exactly how old I was. I was like 17 or 18. And I was looking to get a leopard gecko anyway. But I was working with this girl who had a male and female bearded dragon, kept them together. And then, well, obviously one of them became gravid. She separated them, gave me the male. And then that was my first reptile that I had. And I did research for the entire week, which I wouldn't recommend just do research for a week. But I worked at a call center at the time where I could literally sit there on reptilemagazine.com or reptiles.com or whatever it was at the time and read all day, 8 hours a day for a week. So I was pretty confident I knew what I was doing. I had everything set up. Everything was up to temperature. Got that one. Then she gave me the female. And then I got one of the babies. Then I got another one of the babies. And then I got Cheech, the leopard gecko that I still have. And then I just kind of took a break for a while. And I became a competitive bodybuilder. I competed for Canada. And then I tore my shoulder apart and couldn't do that. And I'm like, okay, so what do I want to do now? And I went to a reptile expo, and it kind of like brought back this passion that I've had since I was a child about reptiles. Then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so this is what I'm going to do now. And there was one hognose snake in the entire expo in Toronto, so our biggest expo that we have in our country. And I bought it. And then I thought, okay, I like this thing. There's an actual need for hognose snakes because everybody was asking, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? And I bought the only one. I was the first guy through the door. I bought it. And I thought, okay, so there's a need for hognose snakes, so I'll breed them. That's the difference between breeding ball pythons. We don't need more ball python breeders, not really, because there's so many of them. So I filled a need, and I guess I don't know like why I'm going off in detail. Your question was when did I start? So the answer is like 12 or 13 years ago.
12 to 13. All right. Yeah, I've been keeping about 9.5 years now.
Yeah, you obviously started at a much younger age than I did.
I mean, I'm 14 years old right now.
Oh, okay. I would have guessed you're like 20, but okay, all right. Well, but yeah, well, I wish I would have been able to get reptiles when I was 14, but I lived home, and the only reason I could get the bearded dragon in the first place is because I was at an age where my parents started charging me rent to live at home. And it's like, well, if I'm gonna pay to live here, then I get extra privileges I didn't have before if I'm helping to pay, bills and mortgage and stuff. So I just brought it home, and there was no dust up, and I knew I couldn't bring a snake because my mom is terrified of snakes. In the same way, I kind of am afraid of spiders, and I wouldn't really want one in my house. I wouldn't like freak out about it, but I think that it's the same way. Like I can understand why my mom didn't want a snake, and it was kind of like that was the hard line. So I didn't get my first snake until I like moved out of my parents' house. I was in my 20s.
Yeah, my mom likes my animals quite a bit. She really likes my reptiles. My bugs, she doesn't not like them, but doesn't really want to get near them. Same thing with my dad. He just doesn't really have an opinion on it. So they kind of just let me do what I want. Yeah, I've been keeping since I was like 3 years old. So they've just gotten used to it by now.
That's very cool. I never had that experience, and it's like my mom's like deathly afraid of snakes. So like she doesn't go in my reptile room, and like every year I make my mom a custom calendar of my dogs. Right? She loves the dogs, so I make a custom calendar. My sister, I've given her 3 animals for her birthday. This isn't like this is what she asked for and did research for. So she's got a couple of ball pythons. She had a hognose snake, leopard gecko. And so she made my mom a calendar of her animals one year. And I think my mom must have burned it. I never saw it ever again. Like she wouldn't put it up. She was just afraid. Like she didn't even want to look at the pictures of the snakes. So, and she's got beautiful snakes. She had one of my champagne lessers, which looks like a leucistic, which is a little tinge of yellow.
Yeah, I know those.
Yeah, so it's
I'm like going back to what you said, we don't need more ball python breeders. I truly know that, but like they are really one of my favorite species, and I'm definitely gonna breed them when I'm older.
Well, here's
right now,
the disclaimer is if you can sell them and give them good homes, go for it. Balls to the wall, go for it. But if you're one of those guys, I'll just sell them on Craigslist. People will snatch them up. No one's buying your normal ball python on Craigslist unless it's for $5. Sorry. And even here in Canada, where everything is more expensive, I have literally purchased normal ball pythons for $5. People give them away, or they'll feed them to their other snakes. So if you have a good home,
I know that.
Go for it.
Do I know that, dude? Like that was, I could have been breeding snakes a while ago, like getting back into it, a while ago. I mean, like last year I could have started, but I just didn't know if I was ready to put in that much time into it, It's like put that much time into just like finding the proper places to sell them, because like we don't have very many expos here in the Netherlands. We only have like 1 or 2 a year. Yeah, I'm in the Netherlands.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. So you guys are like kind of similar time zone. Then it's like what, 10 or 11 o'clock right now?
Right now it's 9:14. Ben, it's 8:14.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but yeah.
Like that's true. When for breeding spiders, that's why I didn't go for the easiest species to breed, because I knew I wouldn't sell them at all. Like they're so cheap. They're literally like £3, which is like $4 maybe for a spiderling.
About $5 ish, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's responsible of you, and I think a lot of people don't do that. They just get into it, and it's exciting. Yeah. I get it. It's exciting. You get some snakes, you make some new snakes. It's exciting. I've always been interested in breeding even before I did it, but my thing for myself was, hey, like, set a good example and make sure you have homes for everything. And my hognose snakes, they sell so fast. Even before I had a channel, they sell so fast because they're sought after. And then now that I have a channel, I breed ball pythons again because I can sell them. And I can sell anything now because I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to have a big audience. So it's easy for me to sell. But if you're
Also,
Joe
like,
Blow in mom's basement
right,
and you don't have a home for it, then just don't start
right,
to begin with.
right, yeah. Also, like, that's one of the. If I was in America, dude, I would never even consider breeding ball pythons because I would just flop. I would waste money. I wouldn't create a proper business, and it just wouldn't be worth my time. No matter how much I enjoyed the species, like, just wouldn't be worth it, you know? Different keeping them, but like trying to become a full breeder of ball pythons, which is not what I want to do, you know? But in the Netherlands, they're common, but they're like hognose common, you know?
Interesting.
So there's still a large market for them here. And, you know, I mean, hognoses are really pretty rare here. I mean, and if you find one, like a normal Western hognose would probably go for like 300 euros,
Wow.
which is like $350. It's crazy expensive here, man, for hognoses. So I kind of like decided from a pretty young age, actually, like I'm gonna breed reptiles as my job, and I'm not gonna breed one species. I already have plans to get a male tegu. Gonna try to breed them. I definitely want to breed my Savannah monitor because we need more captive born babies, captive bred babies in the hobby. Going to work with boa constrictors, corn snakes, invertebrates. I mean, tons of species I want to work with because, like, I just feel like it's so much harder to create a business with just one species. And I also felt like I would get bored, you know? If I work with one individual species for like 20 years, I think I would get bored with it, you know? And I would hate for that to happen. So that's kind of what I decided with.
Well, I think too, like to breed something, you should at least take care of that animal for like a while. I don't know how much time is a while, but
Right.
with hognose snakes, I got one and I actually really liked it. So I like keeping hognose snakes. So I started breeding something I actually like and I have never got bored of. But yeah, there are certain animals like I like my bearded dragon, but I think they're kind of boring. I wouldn't breed them. I wouldn't
Fair
want
enough.
a ton of them. I like having one because it's an animal that I can take out and handle. I don't have to worry about it when I'm filming. It just sits on my shoulder. He's super cool. He's super chill. He'll sleep on my shoulder for 8 hours. I'll sit at his desk and edit for 8 hours, get up, go to the bathroom, get a drink, and he'll be just sleeping. Like I like that, but also I like having my milk snake or my California king snake, which kind of like moves around. So I like having a variety, but I would never breed something that I don't actually like because then all of a sudden you have this big collection that you're eventually going to get rid of or you're going to neglect. Either way, it's going to be one or the other.
But
so
yeah, I agree with that. But also, like, you have to think, like, you probably haven't gotten bored of hognoses because you don't just keep hognoses, you know?
yeah,
You
I
keep
agree.
so many other
Yeah.
species. Like, if I were to just keep tegus, like, no matter how much I love them, I'm sure I would get bored with them, you know?
Well, I think there's certain people that they can do one thing and do one thing really well and they're cool with it. And those people are generally masters of whatever it is that they do. But I'm not one of those people. I'm not a master.
Me neither.
Like I like reptiles and I like making videos. So I put those two things together. There's a lot of other things I like as well. My favorite thing in the world to do is go up on a stage and scream dick jokes at people, right? I don't make enough money to do that for a living. I make enough money doing this to do for a living, but I actually like doing this. And I got to put two things together. And if you asked me when I was 8 years old, what do you want to do for a living? I would have told you I want to talk about reptiles on TV. So this is the version of TV now. And I want to be a stand-up comedian. And I'm both. So I got to do both things. But the reason that I do these things well is because I put a lot of effort into those things. And because also I don't do one thing, it's kind of like three things. I don't lose interest because I can bounce back and forth. But there are certain people that don't need three things. They need one thing. And, you know, if you're like a ball python breeder and that's all you do, there are certain people that can do that really well. But I think you and I are kind of the same in that way where we'd get bored. And if I just kept one species, I'd get bored. And if I just did video editing for someone else, I'd get bored. And if I just did stand-up, I'd get bored. So I kind of have to have many things.
Yeah.
I have too many hobbies.
For me, like, animals would be enough, right? Go on, Ben, because I see you're holding a Scolopendra dahani and
Yeah, that's why I love invertebrates, because you can go for it,
Oh,
because they're
not a
also
scorpion.
easy and generally pretty cheap as well. You can go for it from a little mantis like this to
Oh.
something like,
What is that?
and they're all pretty easy generally.
Ben, show that up again. You totally just glitched.
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, so
this is Scolopendra dohani. This is the Vietnamese giant centipede.
Yeah, I actually have a breeding pair of these.
What
I'm going to be
does that
breeding
thing
this.
come from?
So that's
Vietnam.
yeah, but
that looks like it's not of this world. I've seen pictures of them before, but like that is crazy to see it in relation to a human. I've only seen pictures by itself, but that thing is like
I think I have 2 of them of that same species. I'm going to breed them. And mine's about 25 centimeters, 30 centimeters a foot, to put that in perspective. So it's like
I'm
2
Canadian.
inches less
I know
than a
the
foot.
metric system.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I'm trying to convert shit here, but like, okay.
Yeah, I get that all the time. Hey, man, can you convert stuff into centimeters? It's like, well, I could, but 78% of people who watch me are American, and they use freedom units for whatever reason. Do we talk about how dumb the imperial system is? So dumb, so dumb. And it's ridiculous because man, so
get with the rest of the world.
Yeah, like if I measure it's in Canada, because we're so close. I live 20 minutes from the United States. I can see it if I drive like down the road. We use a mixture of both. So I weigh myself in pounds. I am 5 foot whatever, right? I use that. I don't use meters. But if I go outside, I use Celsius. If I measure the temperature of my pool, I use Fahrenheit. Like we use kilometers, but like I'll tell you, right? But we'll use, so it's 5 kilometers away. So how long is it going to take? How many miles an hour are you driving? Like, why do we do this? Like, I don't know why we mix them up. So I kind of know both. But anyway, that was just my tangent on imperial system is so dumb, and the whole world should just like switch over.
It is, man. To be honest, though, like I lived 11 years in America. That's why I have such an American accent, right?
I was going to ask you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I lived 11 years in America. I was born there. And like, I still say things like I say I weigh myself in kilos and I use centimeters, but I'll also say I have my Tegu in a 6 foot Viv, you know? Like, I mix things up because, like, I don't know. I'm also the same as like Canadians, you know. I mix things up, I guess, right?
Well, yeah,
but that's just
how I was. Well, it's the same thing. Same thing. Like, well, you're born in a place that uses one, and then now you live in a place that uses the other. Where I was always lived here, but I also like the TV we watched growing up was American because it's right there, right? Like everything, our radio stations, even like a lot of those are American. So yeah, just kind of like how you grow up.
I'll be right back. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I got another call in 7 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So I got to go anyway. But hey, thank you guys very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And
yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, you guys are doing a really great job. I appreciate the way you guys do this, and you both are very level-headed. And I know you're both like, I can't believe you're 14. But anyway, it's like you guys. I think it's awesome. Right? You guys have a bright future, and I hope you guys continue doing this and having really great guests on, like Professor Herp. And so thank you for having me on, and thanks for what you do.
Yeah, thanks, man. See you later, man.
All right, see ya.
All right, bye.
That was awesome.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching. That was Wickens Wicked Reptiles.